Welcome to the Bike Talk with Dave podcast. I'm your host, Dave Mabel, and I'm glad you're here. My guest today is no stranger to long, cold rides or even multi-week adventures. Leah Gruhn has ridden the Northern Minnesota Winter Ultra Arrowhead 135 for more than a decade, as well as the Tuscobia 160 and even the Iditarod Trail 350. And in 2017, she and her husband jumped on their bikes in Banff, Canada, and you guessed it, they rode south to the U.S.-Mexico border in the Tour Divide. This winter, she flew back to Alaska and rolled across Kinnick Lake and up the Iditarod Trail for the 1,000-mile journey towards Nome. 21 days later, she was the first and only female to complete the entire journey across Alaska this year. She was kind enough to spend some time on Bike Talk with Dave just prior to heading south to Florida for a week of warmth. I really enjoyed getting to know her, and I hope you will too. So why don't you grab yourself a cup of Chain and Spoke coffee and enjoy the show. Leah Gruhn. Gruhn, am I saying that right?
Yep, that's correct. Gruhn.
Gosh, welcome to Bike Talk with Dave. I'm thrilled to have you on. You just got back from Alaska to another round of winter in Duluth. Welcome home and congratulations on your great trip.
Great. Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Gosh, how was your trip?
Gosh, in a nutshell, I would say incredible. It's kind of hard to quickly summarize it. Something of that length is like a little bit of, or a lot of everything. You know, if it was a 1 or 2 day race, you can characterize it as like, cold year, slow, cold times,
yep.
Warm times, soft trail, firm trail. But on something of this length, you kind of experience the full gamut of conditions. It was beautiful. There was good camaraderie amongst, the other racers. Really good company throughout the whole time. So it was way more beautiful and fun than I had imagined it would be. So,
oh, cool. And that was kind of a trick question. So I just wanted to throw you off in the beginning because of course I know like you spent, I'm not sure what your final time was, just over 3 weeks, we'll say.
21 days, 2 hours and 50 something minutes.
So right at 3 weeks. Awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats. That's awesome. But there's no way to summarize that in a sentence. There's no elevator speech that does
right.
the Iditarod Trail justice for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, before we dive into your Iditarod experience, I want to kind of find out what led you there. Everybody starts somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You rode a fat bike. You did not. The Iditarod Trail Invitational you can do on foot, skis, or bike, and you chose a fat bike. But I want to find out what led you there. What was your first kind of experience with, I'll call it serious cycling, like, kind of beyond the cruising around the neighborhood on
Yeah, and I can kind of even back it up a little bit before there. When I was so I grew up primarily in Rhode Island. And on the East Coast, my parents are both from Minnesota. And every summer, starting at the age of 11 until I was 17, I would come back to Minnesota in the summer and go on a canoe trip. And the canoe trip started at like 10 days in the Boundary Waters in northern Minnesota. And then each summer, there was a progression where you would go on a longer trip that would be more remote than the previous year. So when I was 17, it was a 45-day canoe trip in the Canadian Arctic. And so you'll see the theme of kind of like each time I come back, do something a little bit longer and more challenging. And then kind of like the short story is like perpetuate that to a 43-year-old. And this is where you end up. That is your model. But then I worked at that camp for 5 years. And then I led a group of when I was in my 20s, I led a group of 6 women who were 17 and 18 in the Canadian Arctic. And, it was great. Like scared a grizzly bear out of my campsite that was eating the food, and went down rapids, and it was great fun. And then then I was in college, and then moved to Duluth, Minnesota, when after college, and was doing a lot of cross country skiing and winter camping, and one of my well, I guess, yeah, we were doing a lot of cross country skiing and winter camping. And one of my friends said, hey, let's sign up for this crazy thing, the Tuscobia and then Arrowhead 135. And I had been following that Arrowhead 135 event for years. Arrowhead 135 is a race of the same format as the Iditarod Trail Invitational, in that you can bike, run, or ski. It's in northern Minnesota in the coldest part of the winter. It runs from International Falls on the Canadian border down to Tower. And on a snowmobile trail, and conditions can be challenging. It's kind of epic. And I felt like it was in my backyard, and I knew people who had done it. And so I was always really intrigued to hear results, watch the trackers, and see what was going on. So with this friend who I cross country skied a lot with, we decided, let's give this a shot on skis. We had a great winter. We trained a lot. We went out, we did it. I got tendonitis in my shins and only made it halfway. So it's one of my two times I was at Arrowhead 135 and didn't finish. And then also around that same time, there was a gravel bike race that started up in Duluth. It was Heck of the North. And it was a gravel century, so it was 100 miles on gravel roads. And I thought, I'll give this a try. And for that one, I hadn't trained as much. And I started doing it, and I just felt way in over my head. And so for the whole first half, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, no, I can't do this whole thing. I'm going to have to drop at some point. What am I going to drop? Like, where am I going to go? Am I going to take the roads back? Am I going to call my husband? Like, kind of what's my plan here? And when am I actually going to pull the trigger on this thing? And so I was kind of pondering this and being indecisive about it all. And then I ended up, before I did anything, I got to the midpoint of the race, which is the furthest point away from the start and finish. And so at that point, I was like, well, shoot, if I'm going to quit, I'm going to take the same roads back. I may as well just stay on the course and just finish this thing off. So I did. And, of course, I was exhausted and one of the last people to finish. But still, it was a lesson in persistence and knowing that, with the right attitude, we're capable of more than we think we are. And so then after that, I was like, okay, if I didn't think I could do this, but I could, what other things are there out there that I might be able to do if I plan and have good luck and, supportive friends who I meet along the way or whatever. So then around that same time, a friend of mine was selling a fat bike. He was a friend who had done the Arrowhead 135 for years. And so I thought, that'd be a more fun way to do the Arrowhead 135 than on skis. So I bought his bike. Next year, went back and finished the Arrowhead 135 on bike. And then I've been going ever since. And I just finished it for the 10th time this past winter, a couple months ago. So
that's awesome.
So that's kind of how I got into winter biking.
Who'd you buy the fat bike from?
John Kurth in Duluth.
Oh, I don't know John Kurth. I wondered if it might be Todd McFadden.
Oh, yeah. Todd he's always been a mentor of mine, and he's a good friend. And so
he's a good human being.
Absolutely.
We stayed with him a couple of nights when we went up to Arrowhead a couple of years ago.
Yep.
2020, infamous year.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, you dove right in. You didn't I started doing 5-mile rides. I started riding the trail for 20 miles to town. Well, I'm going to do the 100-mile Heck of the North.
Yeah.
Crazy.
There was some biking too. I biked a lot as a kid, and in college I went to the University of Minnesota, and the campus is huge. So I biked to get around the campus and did some biking around Duluth too before signing up for the Heck of the North.
Yeah, that's very different than a 100-mile gravel ride.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And are you still going up to Heck of the North A? Can I say that?
Definitely. The Grand du Nord is coming up in 7 weeks or something. It's going to be here before I know it.
It's going to be, that's still going to be a fat bike ride, isn't it? You guys have
it could be.
So much snow.
Yeah, definitely could be.
It's crazy. You could ski it.
Hope not.
So I feel like, 45-day canoe trips, the Iditarod must have seemed short. relatively speaking.
Well, it's scratched that itch though, you know,
Yeah.
because I grew up doing long trips, and what I really like about long trips compared to something that's just a few days or even a week is when you do something shorter, like you're thinking about the past couple days, and then you know, a day or two go by, and then you're thinking about what you're going to be doing afterwards. And like, okay, I'm going to get to this town, and then these are my logistics home, and then I'm going to talk to these people and do all this stuff. Whereas for a longer trip, you can really get immersed, and it becomes a lifestyle and not like something that has like a start and end. It's just kind of this, like, it becomes your life. You get immersed in it, and there's a rhythm to it. And so that's what I was hoping for, and I totally got that. It was awesome. It was great.
Huh. That's cool. I've heard that from, I've talked to Peter without an E, John Logar, obviously Steve Cannon.
Mm-hmm.
Bayot says that, and it's almost, I guess, what I hear, almost disappointing to leave the trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the reason I decided to do the ride to Nome this year wasn't to go to Nome. I could have just flown to Nome, and it would have been a whole lot faster and easier.
Sure,
You know,
sure.
my goal in going up there was to go on this long, like seemingly endless trail, this endless ride, and like the trail did feel endless. Like I was, riding along like 600 miles in, like, wow, there's still like hundreds of miles of country to tackle and things to see and obstacles to overcome and all of that. It's the journey, not the no. Yeah, it's the journey, not the destination.
Right, right.
And so I was really, sad the last couple of days that it was going to be coming to a close so soon, because I wasn't ready for it to end. Like the group I was with, we got into a great rhythm and we were moving, and it was a lot of fun. And so, but it's an analogy for life that things, do eventually come to an end, like even if it's fun at the time. So
Yep, you turn the page and then open a new chapter of the book,
yeah.
which you do. But as you say that, I also picture Tim Hewitt, who has done, I don't know, 100 million trips up the
Mm-hmm.
Iditarod Trail or something. Most of them on foot, once on bike, and he said he hated it. But he, and it's just, here I am in Des Moines, Iowa. Yesterday I did a 100K bike ride, a team gravel thing, and it's like, whew, that was a long day. That was a long ride. And I still I got back to my car and I put warm, dry clothes on and had dinner that night and slept in my bed, and it was fine. And then here's you doing 1,000 miles of the Iditarod Trail, and it's like, gosh, you must just always look forward to the finish and getting to Nome. And then there's Tim Hewitt, who starts in freaking Fairbanks and walks to Nome and turns around and walks back on the Iditarod Trail, which he didn't complete, but he went for that. And it's
Yeah.
based on what you said, you can picture wanting to do that.
Oh,
And
definitely.
it's not about hey, I can't wait to get back to my car so that I can put warm, dry clothes on and then have a beer and a hot dog and
Yep.
whatever,
Yep.
and sleep in my own bed. It's like I want to live this life on the
Mm-hmm.
trail. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and like I felt great towards the end. Like we weren't putting in like killer days towards the end, and we were sleeping inside and eating good food, and I think by that point too, my body had kind of figured out, how to, like, I was well recovered. I wasn't like really taxing myself the way I was in the first, week and a half, where you kind of get run down and tired. So I said to George Adams, who I was riding with, I was like, hey, how do you feel right now? And he said, I could ride another 1,000 miles right now.
Hmm.
And I said,
Yeah.
that's well put. I could too. Like I just felt strong and good, and like I didn't even need to take a day off and Nome. I could have kept going.
Wow, that's kind of amazing. That's pretty cool, and I'm glad you explained it like that so that we can kind of begin to understand that, well, that mentality, that rhythm, that lifestyle that you immerse yourself into and
Mm-hmm.
adopt to, maybe is the right word. But um I do want to dive deeper into the Iditarod, and I kind of keep bouncing back to that. But you also did kind of a long ride a few years ago that went north to south, and it was a little warmer then. You did the Tour Divide
Mm-hmm.
in, I want to say 2017. Does that sound right?
Yep, that's correct.
How was that? And I'm going to ask you at some point to compare the two, but tell us a little bit about your Tour Divide experience. And of course, there's another trick question, like here's your elevator speech on Tour Divide.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was also another chance to, get away and immerse myself in something long and really challenge myself in a physical way. And I rode that with my husband, Jure. And yeah, we trained and planned a lot and started in Banff, Alberta, and then rode south. And it was really hard. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Like we're sleeping only 6 hours at night, putting in 100 miles a day, fully loaded, going up and over passes in the Rockies the whole time. And then once I got down to southern Colorado, I just started feeling really kind of like just run down and just exhausted. And so I told him to go ahead. I stayed back to go to urgent care and just see if there was anything that was easily treatable or anything going on. And the doctor said, if you were from here, I'd be running all kinds of tests on you right now because you're tired and weak and you're, telling me all these things. But he's like, but based on like the fact that you said that you started feeling tired and weak when you got to Colorado and kind of got up to altitude. You're from Minnesota. You've been pushing hard for weeks. He's like, how about you take a few rest days and then go back at it? And so I said like, okay, yeah, I thought to myself like, okay, yeah, I'll sleep tonight and leave early tomorrow morning. But I had taken a full rest day at that point. So then I kept going and finished the day after my husband. And once again, great people. I made great friends on the trail and who I still keep in touch with, and great community. It was a lot of fun.
That's cool. Still one of the hardest things you've ever done?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Would you go back?
We're just pushing so hard, like just so many hours a day in the saddle. And I just so wanted a break, just like wanted to just like take an early afternoon or whatever. But we just felt pressure to race and go as fast as we could. So definitely did that.
Where did that pressure come from? I mean,
from us.
It is kind of a race, but
Yeah.
it's also not really a race.
Yep.
But you were competing, quote unquote,
Yeah.
with the others in the crew. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Doing everything we could to keep moving forward efficiently.
Yeah. That's interesting. And how long did that take you?
29 days.
29 days. So you're out there 9 days, 8 days longer than on the Iditarod Trail, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That being said, it's quite a bit longer. So.
Yeah, 2,750 or thereabout.
Yeah.
So almost 3 times as long.
Would you do that again?
Oh, I would, but I have limited time to do things. So if I could, go on a long trip like that every summer, like definitely, I would love to. It's a wonderful route. It was awesome, but there are things that I'd rather do before I go back. Like the Silk Road Mountain Race would be really cool in Kyrgyzstan, or, touring in other locations like around the world. So I would love to go back, but I'm going to go to other places before taking that on.
Dig it. Arkansas High Country Race?
Yeah, that'd be cool. Although a year ago, we went down there kind of in April to ride for a week, and I rode a lot of gravel, and that is a tough course. Rode parts of that, and it is steep, and like the gravel is so different from what we have up here. It's big rocks, chunky. I have a lot of respect for that course. Lots.
I think that's awesome because, it's in the middle of the United States, and it's surrounded by cities and towns and highways and interstates and trains and planes and everything. Like it's in the middle of America, right? And yet it's this remote, super hard, super long adventure race that is just plopped right down there in the middle of Arkansas. So it's kind of crazy that it can be so hard and so remote, surrounded by Little Rock and Fayetteville and Tulsa and, all the towns and the highways. And we drove through that area on our way home from Texas last week. And it's a beautiful area, but it's like, we were just on the interstate. So big deal. Let's just do a ride around it. But no, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
That would be hard. So let's dive into the Iditarod. That is why we're chatting, and I love having you on. I love, um, uh, I love having you on. I'm going to say that.
Thanks.
So, first of all, tell me about your. It's an invitational, and I don't know that it's 100% recommend or required, but it's definitely recommended to do the 350-mile ride to McGrath. You did that a few years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
and my understanding is it is a requirement to finish
it
the
is a
350
requirement.
before you
Okay.
can sign up for the 1,000. And I did that in 2016.
And how
Um,
was that for you?
that was amazing, absolutely incredible. So once again, my husband rode. He rode the first 130. He found out he could get into that just like 2 weeks before the race, so he went up. So we rode the first 130 together, but he was going at my pace. Um, and then like I mean, first of all, the thought of crossing a mountain range in the winter on a bicycle is like so far out there. I mean, like,
It is.
where else, like, where else do you do that? Like, it would be impressive to cross a mountain range on foot, in the summer,
Right. Right.
let alone on a bicycle in the winter.
And not just any mountain range,
Right. Yeah, the Alaska
the
range.
Alaska range.
Yeah. Like right down the street from Denali.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So, I mean, just like, so that was just so cool to go from literally when you start, you're across the street from the ocean, from the
Hmm.
Pacific Ocean. You go kind of up along rivers and river valleys, up, and then you keep climbing up and over the Alaska range, and then down into the interior to a village that's, Alaska natives, and then finishing in McGrath. And it was an exceptionally fast year. It wasn't when the course record was set, but it was almost that fast. And it was faster. I guess going into it, you hear about like the one year they got a foot of snow and then it was 40 below and really windy after that. And, my friend from Winnipeg got horrible frostbite on his face. And, you hear all of just the crazy stuff that can happen. So during the time that I was there, I was like, well, it's 10 below in the mornings, but this is so much better and easier and more fun than I had anticipated that it could be. I was kind of prepared for the worst. Kind of in
Hmm.
general, my mantra, I guess, is a little bit like prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So then when I'm in it, I'm like, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought it could be, or as it could be at other times. But it was just gorgeous to go through the mountains, and it was incredible. So then, and one of the other things that was fun was to, you get into a checkpoint and they have things stockpiled in preparation for the dog sled race.
Oh,
They'd have
sure.
like straw bales covered with plastic, and some of the volunteers would be there getting ready. And then after the race, it was such a fast year, I was able to fly back to Anchorage in time to be there for the ceremonial start
Oh,
of the
wow.
dog sled race in downtown
Yeah.
Anchorage, like a block away from our hotel, on the Saturday. And I had a friend who was mushing, who was going to be on the trail. And so, or friend of a friend. And so I was able to talk to him about the route. And so, like, after that, I was just so amazed by not only the biking part, but the connection to the dog sled race. And so, starting at that point, I definitely had my eye on the full 1,000-mile race. And Jill Homer rode the full 1,000 that year, and then she wrote the book, and I read the book, and I was in it. And it was just like bringing back so many memories. It was just so fun to read her book. And so, I definitely, after that year, had been wanting to go back and do the 1,000. So
Did you sign up for the 350 with the intent of doing the 1,000?
no, I thought, no, in 2016 or 2015 when I registered, I thought like the 350 is my bucket list thing. I'm going to go up there and do the 350 once, and it's going to be amazing, and I'll be satiated.
Yeah.
And
No, I hear you. It is funny. Alaska, like, takes its little fingers and wraps them right around you and doesn't let go, doesn't it?
definitely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
just this. So, I just got home over a week ago, a week and 2 days ago is when I got home. Race registration for next year opened up yesterday. And so
Yeah,
this
they do.
morning, my husband and I signed up for next year.
Oh, awesome.
So,
Your
and
husband for the 1,000?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
awesome. They do that on purpose, They give you a little time to forget the pain.
Right.
but get you when you're still excited.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
awesome. So the next year's a northern route, isn't it?
hmm
Great.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And everyone who I was riding with this year had already completed that part of the northern route. And the term they used was completing the circle.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I'm going to go up next year and complete the circle. And, on some level, like I was so appreciative that I was with race veterans. On one hand, I feel like I almost need to like give back to future people who are up there by, kind of sharing that knowledge that I gleaned from them.
hmm
Just in terms of navigating the towns and the kind of the culture and the kind of how it all works past McGrath.
Yeah, it is not being there, and I'm going to use the word doing it, although I didn't really do it. I did the Iditarod Trail in airplanes,
Mm-hmm.
and that I would recommend that. um, but you learn so much. I would do things so different if I went back, knowing
Mm-hmm.
what I know. So that kind of knowledge is absolutely valuable. Like, how do you navigate? Oh, there's a grocery store in McGrath. Go to the grocery store. Everything is $5 or more. So if you need a loaf
Yeah.
of bread, have $5. Um, it's probably more now, um, but that's super invaluable, valuable information. One of the reasons, or not one of the reasons, but one of the things that I wanted to do in the film A Thousand Miles to Nome is help people kind of understand the Iditarod Trail. Because before I went there, my vision was you go across Kinnick Lake from the start and you are out in the middle of absolute nowhere, like
Mm-hmm.
from the start, and you're following your compass and a map, and maybe you see some stakes here and there, but you're out in the middle of nowhere until you get to Nome, and that's very far from the truth. Like, you leave and you're, do I go on this snowmobile trail? Sorry, snow machine trail, or that snow machine trail, or that snow machine? Like, which snow machine trail takes me to where I'm going? And there's roadhouses, and then the little villages, and the little villages are like real places where there's drywall on the walls, and there's electric
Mm-hmm.
lights, and they have refrigerators, and like, it's just like a normal little village. It's
Yeah, the
small, but it's
thermostat
there,
to keep
and
to keep
there's,
it indoors. It's consistent temperature. You don't have to put
yeah, and
fire wood in
there
the
are
stove.
schools there, and there's a post office, so it's like normal life. But it's, you don't, I didn't picture that, and so I wanted to take people through Alaska and kind of picture that. So I feel like that kind of information and knowledge for somebody who hasn't done it and hasn't been there is super valuable. So kudos to you
Mm-hmm.
for thinking that even that's important, and it's
Mm-hmm.
important to share that kind of knowledge. So take me, if you would, um, even though you follow the Iditarod Trail, and the villages are the villages and the trail is the trail, like, every year is different. Really, every day is different and has its own
Mm-hmm.
character, has its own characters. Um, Take me through kind of the first few days, if you will. How was the start of your race this year?
Sure. So my husband did do the 350. So we are riding together generally for the first 350, although maybe it's only for half the day, and then we would be at the same place at night. But everyone left Kinnick Lake, um, and also the starting gun is an actual gun. Down here in the
It
lower
is
48, there'll be like a starting gun, but in Alaska, it's like a gun.
a
Um,
shotgun, I
yeah,
think,
which
or a
is
rifle, big old rifle.
yeah. Um, so and also just for the listeners, the rule for the race isn't that you have to follow the exact route, but you have to hit the checkpoints in the prescribed order. So technically, there can be multiple routes to get to a checkpoint. So sometimes it's a little bit of a choose your own adventure, take your own chance as far as how you get from one checkpoint to the other. But we started out, people took all different paths to get to the first checkpoint on Butterfly Lake. Got there at dusk, had a beautiful view of the mountains that are behind Anchorage. That was great. Kept riding and then dropped down onto the Yetna River. And from that point, it was maybe 20 miles on the Yetna River to the next roadhouse. Wasn't a checkpoint this year, but to a roadhouse. And around
Yetna
that
Roadhouse?
time, Yeah,
The
I get in the
Yetna
roadhouse.
Roadhouse?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. It
Yeah,
used to be
it
the
looked
first
like that
checkpoint.
wasn't a checkpoint this year. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yep. Yep. That was a change. But they were great. They called themselves the unofficial checkpoint. They took really, really good care of us. Really good care of us. So, around that time, the Northern Lights came out. And it was just the most dazzling show. We were riding with someone who's a pilot for Alaska Airlines, so she sees Northern Lights all the time. And at first,
Oh.
when they came out, I think she was thinking kind of like, okay, you tourists, like, they're green Northern Lights. We see this all the time up here in Alaska. But then even later on, even she was taking photos of them. I mean, they were just moving and green and red, and they were absolutely breathtaking. And, they weren't out for just a couple hours. They were out all night long.
Wow.
For hours and hours. You could look up and see what they were doing. I got a video and they're, dancing around, and it was so cool. Also around the time it was 30 below. And so, it was cold. You can't stop to do stuff. But a friend of mine from Minneapolis, Amanda Harvey, had a flat tire. I came up behind her, and some people had stopped to help her fix her flat. So they went ahead. I stayed with her to help her. And we got her tire inflated, but then she had a heck of a time getting the through axle back in, just because the grease on the through axle was stiff because it was so cold. And I honestly don't know how she got it back in, but she did. And then she was going, and then she ended up having a couple more flats. She put the bike on her back. She ended up walking into the checkpoint and got there after dawn. Anyway, so after she was kind of sad, I left, kept going. At one point that night, there was a trail that kind of left the river and started to go overland. And so I was looking at my GPS, and there, we were following bike tracks. And so I thought, like, oh, cool. Like, instead of taking this huge big bend in the river, now there's a shortcut, like this trail that's been put in through the woods. This is going to be great. It's going to save us a ton of time in getting to, or not to the checkpoint, but to the roadhouse. So I get in there about a mile, and then people are coming towards me, and they say, no, this is a different trail. This is a dead end. We don't want to go down here. Turn around and go back to the river. So it turned out, and it turns out that's what everyone had done. They'd followed the tracks to a certain point and then turned around and come back out. Also around that time, some people started to get cold hands and toes. A friend of mine, George, he had really cold hands, and someone gave him some hand warmers. Other times people were walking because their feet were really cold, and they were concerned that they might get frostbite, so they were walking to try to warm up their feet. There was another woman out there, Kinsey, who ended up winning the women's field in the 350. She had 2 flat tires, so she was pushing her bike the whole way into Yentna. So there was a lot of challenges that first night. So I get into Yentna. I'm getting something to eat, and then the guy next to me has taken off his gloves, and he starts looking at his hands, and his fingertips are blue on most of his fingers. So that's bad.
You don't want to see that.
No. So I get something to eat. I lay down. I get up in the morning, and then a guy came in who was hypothermic. And so the people at the Yentna Roadhouse called paramedic. They came in on a helicopter to assess and give him an IV and take care of him. And then there was someone else who got, bad news on their face. There was a lot of frostbite that first night. It felt like, freshmen in college when you take for the engineering students, they take a physics class. It's like the weed out class. Like that night was kind of the weed out night. If you're going to get frostbite, you got it that night. There were a lot of people pushing to get to that roadhouse who thought, like, I just need to push through this and get there. Whereas I think if those temperatures had come later in the race, people would have said, I know it's going to be cold. I'm just going to hunker down, get in early, be inside that night. But people were just kind of feeling the adrenaline of doing it. So I think that kind of compounded it.
Yeah, and it's a big push to Yetna. I think, what is that, 60 miles up the trail?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
and it's a 2 p.m. start.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big push for a late start.
Right. And it was, it was so cold that, like, the snow wasn't running real fast. It was just kind of like Velcro-y and slow. And Yeah, it took a long time to get there. So I think I rolled in somewhere between like 2 a.m. and 4 a.m.
Wow.
And I was annoyed because my whole strategy going into the 1,000-mile race was like, I'm going to sleep 6 hours a night. I'm going to sleep at night. I'm not going to do these like late night pushes. And then here I was on the very first night, kind of like up past like later than I'd wanted to be. But
you
anyway,
said it, freshman initiation.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So that event ended up taking out a lot of people. And in the end, the finisher rate of the whole event was only 52.5%. So like 47% dropped. And most of them, it was here due to issues they had that first night. And it's also relatively easy. It's easier to get out there than anywhere else on the course. So in any case, they were able to get out. So from there, kind of continued on towards Bentalit. That's a new checkpoint in the to the race, and then left there, skipped Squentna, which was typically always the second, and then pushed on to Shell Lake, which isn't a checkpoint, but the race had arranged to have 2 cabins set aside for racers. And at Shell Lake, there was a fire just maybe in the month before the race started where the lodge burned down. It was this beautiful log cabin lodge. And unfortunately there was a fire.
Yep.
So that was really sad to see where the lodge used to be.
So I have a question about that. Like, how did they manage you guys?
There's still a caretaker on site, and there's other cabins that people can rent out and do things in. So, so there's a cabin for us, and the cabins have wood stoves.
Okay.
So
did you have like, they often in the checkpoints try to feed you guys? Mm-hmm. Were they able to do that there?
No, there's no food at Shell. Just a cabin.
No. Okay.
And then from there went down the Happy River Steps. So we stayed at Shell that night, and then the next morning got up, went down the Happy River Steps. This is where there's like a couple different trails to choose from. Mm-hmm. And so I decided, there was one trail or one kind of road that went around the Happy River Steps, and there was one that took the Happy River Steps. And I thought, because my husband hadn't been there before. I was like, you got to see this. This is great. This is a lot of fun. And so for listeners who don't know, the Happy River Steps it's kind of like this part where it's descending down to a river, and it's generally flat, generally a little bit downhill. And then there are these, like, think of like a children's slide, just kind of these like steep drops that are maybe, 10 plus feet high, but like fairly steep. So they can be fun to ride down. And the last one is particularly steep. And so for that one, I sat down on my bottom, put my bike on top of my lap, and then just like slid down on my butt. And then when I got down to the bottom, I looked at my bike and I thought that my seat stay was bent. I mean, I have a carbon bike, so it wouldn't have been bent. It would have broken. But I was staring at it. My husband's like, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" I'm like, "Oh my God, look at my seat stay. It's bent. Like I broke my bike on sliding down this hill." And he said, "No, the other side is exactly the same. You're fine. Just get up and get on it." So I did. But I had a moment there. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I wrecked this." So then after that, it's a climb, and then you go up into Roan, which is kind of at the base of Rainy Pass. Mm-hmm. Rainy Pass is the high point of the course, and that's when you cross the Alaska Range. One other funny thing that had happened was the very first night at Yentna, or first night, and then the following morning, you have to pay for food and lodging when you're there.
Yentna. Yep.
At Yentna. And I had paid for it and then left like my wallet, which is a Ziploc bag with my credit card and cash on the counter. And so then when I was about 10 miles out, maybe 7 miles out of Yentna, I realized that I had forgotten it. I thought, did I pick that up? And then I looked at my bag. I'm like, I don't have my wallet. Like, how am I going to fly home? I just lost $1,000 in cash, and my credit cards, my health insurance card, everything. And so then by the time I got to the next checkpoint, I opened the door, and then a friend of mine said, "Leah, this is going to freak you out." And I said, "Wait, did someone find my wallet?" I was hoping someone would see it and pick it up and then bring it this way. So she said, yeah, right. Jody found it, and they're going to bring it up to here. And I looked at the tracker and she wasn't going to be there for a couple hours. And so I thought, I'm not going to wait for my wallet. She can give it to someone. It can be Bucket Brigade. She can give it to the next person leaving the checkpoint, and it can get higher up the trail. So, so sure enough, Jody had it, brought it to that checkpoint, and then she gave it to Willie Malonia. And then he took it and brought it up to Roan. So when I was at Roan, I woke up in the morning after sleeping there. I walk out to the table where there's ramen and cans of soup and things. And I look down and here's my driver's license and all the cash.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Which is like, oh my God.
That's super cool. I mean, that's life in the trail, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
That's super cool.
And bless his heart, I think he had put in a super long day, got in that morning at 7:30 or 8:30 or something, but he got my wallet to me as fast as possible. So I'm so appreciative of him to, put in that long day and get it up to me. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. How was Rainy Pass?
So leaving Puntilla, it was really windy, snowing, kind of ground blizzard. The conditions were rough. We were mostly walking. I think I walked at least 15, if not 18 miles that day.
Oh, wow.
Between going up the pass and then over the pass. At that point, my husband had gone ahead. I was riding with a woman named Corey. And once we finally got up to the top, it was right at dusk and the sun was going down. And there were trail markers along the route with reflectors, a little bit of reflective tape on them. But they were not spaced super close to each other. And so they were it was hard to see the next one. I mean, you couldn't always see the next one until you had got a little bit past the trail marker you were closest to. And the area of packed trail was really narrow. So, sometimes you'd be post holing, trying to figure out, what side do I walk right or do I left? How do I get back to the trail? I have no idea where the packed part of it is to even be following. Also descending. So we walked down a lot of it just because it was hard to tell, because it was so drifted that you couldn't see tire tracks or footprints or anything. And then even once we got down longer, at one point I veered off of her tire track, 4 inches over, and it was soft and I kind of went through. So I realized if I'm behind her, I need to stay on her tire track. I can't even, veer over it. There was a movie that came out 20 years ago called A Thin White Line.
Yep.
And I thought about that frequently. It is a thin white line across Alaska where you can ride your bike or kind of stay up. It's really narrow. It could be 4 inches wide. Yeah. It's that thin. So, and so that was scary because it was at dusk and I thought we need to get down off this mountain soon. We cannot stay up here overnight. That would be bad. We just gotta think clearly and be efficient and get down before it gets dark. Cause that time of night, it can get dark fast. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely one of the scariest kind of serious moments, I guess. And then once we got down a little bit lower, we were on the Tatina River for a few miles coming into Roan. And that was also just blowing snow in my eyes, crazy windy, kind of conditions. But then finally we came into Roan, which is a checkpoint. There's a canvas tent there with a stove and drop boxes and pine boughs to put your sleeping bag on. And so I got there and got some veggie brats. I'm vegetarian, so they had some vegetarian brats. The tradition is they give two brats to every racer. So my brats lay down in my sleeping bag and had a great night of sleep that night. So
good.
Yeah.
And the weather was kind of the main character, I feel from what I see and what I watched, really wasn't it through McGrath and beyond?
Yeah. So around that same time when we were getting, or maybe the previous day, they had gotten a foot of snow or something on the north side of the mountain range. And so, so a lot of people had to walk a lot of that. The leaders of the race were walking on the north side or on the far side of the mountains. When we came into Roan, one of the volunteers or two of the volunteers were just getting back and they had driven snowmobiles with a cargo trailer from Roan up to Nikolai and then to the finish of the 350-mile race in McGrath and then come back. So actually they had done a nice job of packing the trail. So I was very appreciative that they had done that because then it set up overnight. So it was mostly rideable the next day.
Yeah. Was there a fair bit of snow in the burn?
Yeah, I mean, there were some bare patches, but not as bare as it could be.
Yeah. Dig it.
Yeah.
So any other major features going into from Roan to McGrath?
Not much. There were a lot of whoop-de-doos or, moguls from the snowmobiles. Yeah. So there's a snowmobile race, the Iron Dog, which is right before the ITI starts. And so when they come through, they put in, or just from all the traffic, there are kind of moguls that set up as a result. But people who I was with said they weren't as bad as they were last year. So that was good. We stayed in Bear Creek Cabin, which is a BLM safety cabin. It's cute and cozy, and it was cold that night and cold the following night. So we were happy to have shelter. Kept going through the burn and stayed in Nikolai the following night. That night, we got in there. It was cold coming in. As soon as the sun went down, the temperature dropped. Right after us, the Italians came in, and they got 36 below Fahrenheit on their thermometers. Oh, wow. So it was cold. I was glad that we got in there as early as we did. Once again, we got wonderful food from the Iditarod or the ITI volunteers, fresh avocado and veggie burgers, and it was great. Really, really nice. And then from there, the next day, it was fine. Some group of 7 snowmobiles came through and kind of churned up the trail. So I had a couple hours of walking and then, riding the rest of it. But yeah, it was great to get to McGrath then after that.
Did you hang out in McGrath long, or was it kind of just a regular stop, rest up and get
No,
moving?
I did stay there for a while. So I got in, I had wanted to ride with Julie Garcia. And she was a day behind me. I think that there's a couple different schools of thought for doing the 1,000 as far as how you approach the stop in McGrath. Some people say it's just another checkpoint. So just go in, stay for a few hours, or if you get there, in the late evening, maybe stay overnight and then start out the next morning. Other people say you should spend 24 hours there to really kind of rest and refuel and kind of collect your thoughts for what comes ahead. So I've been hoping to spend 24 hours there, or just a hair more. But I wanted to wait for Julie, and I just wasn't really sure. I was a little bit hesitant about continuing on because, I had done the 350 in 2016 and I just come into McGrath. So now I've been on the first part of the course twice and kind of knew the checkpoints, knew the deal. And here I was about to head out into the unknown. And I just I didn't want to do that by myself. I wanted to wait for other folks to go. So I stuck around for them. And I had to say goodbye to my husband. He flew back to Anchorage. So that was sad. The Italians took off a day ahead of me. I kind of wanted to go with them, but wasn't quite ready to go. But they had an in-reach, and so I was able to be in communication with them. So I ended up staying 3 nights in McGrath.
Oh, wow.
So then, Julie when she was ready to go, we left there and then headed out from, do you have any other questions before I talk about heading out from McGrath?
Go for it.
Okay. So then we headed out from there, went to Takotna, stopped at an Iditarod checkpoint and talked to one of the veterinarians and some of the other volunteers. And that was cool. Went to Ophir, which is the next checkpoint. And one of the people there were 3 people on foot who were ahead of us, the 3 who ended up finishing the 1,000. And one of them had been coughing. And so he wasn't allowed in the tent with Bad and Takao. And as a result, us 4 bikers coming along afterwards, we weren't allowed in the tent either because they said, we're afraid you might be sick and we don't want to risk getting the mushers sick because the mushers were going to be through there in another day or 2 or whatever.
Sure.
So we pushed on and stayed in a cabin in Ophir. And during this time, it got to be warm. It was sunny. It's probably in the 30s or maybe even 40 degrees. So we were doing a lot of walking, and the trail had kind of deteriorated. Leaving Ophir, it was more of the same, just kind of like sideways, sleet and snow and wet junk. So we got to a shelter cabin called Tolstoy. We decided to take an early afternoon, go in, start a fire, dry out our stuff. Around that same time, my brother's good friend from Minneapolis was in the area. He's a videographer for the Iditarod, or Iditarod Insider. And so his job is to film the lead musher, or the couple mushers in the lead. And so he's always at the front of the race with, there's two guys who are working together. So I told him we were going to stop in at Tolstoy. So he came to Tolstoy to say hi. So it was really fun to.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And he's been doing it for 16 years.
Yeah, that's
And so
cool.
he knows the trail and the racers and, just a wealth of knowledge.
Yep.
So it was really fun.
By this time, has the trail breakers for the dog sled race come through?
Yep.
So the trail's been set ahead of you.
Yep. And I didn't. Right. So when they come through, right, they have big snowmobiles that lay down the track, and then they add additional stakes.
Yeah.
Because one thing is, at this point we had the trail had split into the north and southern routes. So the northern route is followed in even years. The southern route is followed in odd years. And that applies to the Iditarod dog sled race and the ITI. But the Iron Dog always follows the northern route. And so when we left Ophir, or just a few miles past Ophir, we left what had been traveled by the snowmobile race, the Iron Dog race. And so, this part had been staked by the dog sled race.
Mm-hmm. Was it in bad shape? Because I hear the southern route really hasn't been used for a bit. So
Exactly.
Was it in bad shape?
No, it was great. In 2021, due to COVID, what they did is they went to, so it was an odd year. So they were on the southern route. They went to the Iditarod checkpoint and back.
That's right.
But the part past Iditarod, from Iditarod to Shagaluk, nobody had been on that for 4 years. There was a trapper from Shagaluk that used to use that trail, and they had contacted that person. He said, no, I don't use it anymore. I don't know the condition. So, at this point, like, we're at one of the cabins and we hear that, like, there's like the trail crews going ahead to clear brush and any down trees because, like, they don't know, to their knowledge, nobody has been on that section of trail past Iditarod for 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool. And, like, also to be that trail crew and know that the pressure is on, like, the dog teams are coming through in like 1 or 2 days and you got to hurry up and clear any down trees. Hope there's any big piles.
For sure. There's no lollygag in there. I mean,
Right.
You do have to stay ahead of the dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
You're not going to hold up the race because you're still clearing trees.
Right. Could you guys do your 24-hour mandatory layover, please?
Exactly.
So that we can get ahead of you.
Yeah.
That would be uncool.
Yeah. So coming into the Tolstoy cabin, the trail was super soft. We were pushing our bikes a lot of the time. Like I said, it was really wet. So we stopped at Tolstoy. My brother's friend Ian came to visit. And we decided, let's go to sleep early. We'll wake up at midnight, be on the trail by 2. Ian said, I think the trail's going to firm up overnight. It's not going to be super cold overnight, but it'll be cold enough. I think you'll be good. So we got up at 2. We started riding, rode for a couple hours. We were riding. There were like tussocks or hippie heads, kind of these like hummocks, which are like in the Arctic you have those, are kind of like a grass clump with reindeer moss. Anyway, there was low snow, so we were like riding on this Arctic vegetation. And so suddenly it kind of came real to me, like, oh my gosh, we're biking across tundra. This is so cool, because I had seen that vegetation on my Arctic canoe trips, but I'd never experienced it in the winter. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is like the best ever. And then the dog team started coming, and you could see the lights. Mushers have really bright lights because they have to be able to see like a ways ahead of the dog, where the dogs are.
Right.
And so we could see their lights like from the far hills, and they, see them approach. And one of them stopped and he said, how far, the musher ahead of me, how far am I behind? And like trying to figure out like where people were on the trail. And so then we stopped at, basically the point is getting up that morning was kind of the turning point in the trip in terms of like, before that point, 350 had really challenging conditions. Leaving McGrath to Tolstoy cabin, it had been like warm and really wet precipitation and crappy. But then like that morning leaving at 2 a.m., like the trail was firm. We started seeing the dog teams, like everything was awesome from that point on for the whole, like the conditions were just great. And it was easy to be happy. So we were seeing the dog teams. We got to meet Ryan Reddington, who went on to win the race. He lives like 45 minutes away from me in northern Wisconsin. Met the Richie Deal, who went on to be third place. Chatted with him for a while in the cabin and got to see the dogs, like they were taking care of the dogs, like giving them snacks and water. And it was just really cool to see all that. The dogs are moving. So the dog race starts a week after the ITI, but the dogs move a lot faster than we do. And so, so they passed us. Got to talk to, Brent Sass, who's the defending champion, also originally from Minnesota, from the Twin Cities. And then that night we got to the Iditarod checkpoint, which is a ghost town. And it was just absolutely gorgeous. Like the sun was setting. It was just the most idyllic thing. There were tons of dogs there. I met Wade Mars, another musher who lives in northern Wisconsin now. Continued on, the next day and then Julie, who had been riding with us, she had knee pain from that day of getting up at 2. And so she needed to fly out. So she left our group, unfortunately. Yeah. It was really great riding with her. And so we missed her.
And you've kind of developed into a big group now, haven't you? 4 or 5, 6 of you?
It had been 4, and then Julie left, and then we were down to a group of 3.
Okay.
Me and George and Ryan from South Dakota. So then we went over to Shagaluk that day. It was absolutely gorgeous. There were so many times I thought I should stop and take a picture of this, but I'm flying downhill and it's really fun. So I'm just going to keep going and have a mental, a memory of how pretty this is. And that's one thing from talking to George, who's on the northern route. He said the southern route is really striking and pretty compared to the northern route. So we got down to Shagaluk and caught up to the Italians at that point. Because when the trail had been really soft, they had been, working hard and walking and kind of getting through it. And once the trail had frozen up, that's when we kind of went for it. So we caught them. And then from that point on, we were a group of, kind of 6 with Ryan. And then he kind of started to fall a little bit behind. And then we were a group of 5. So me and George and the 3 Italians. So, then we hit the Yukon River and we had good conditions. That one of the challenges with the Yukon River is you can get a headwind with blowing snow, and also you can get slush. The river can be really slushy, but it was cold at that point. I would say from like that turning point I was talking about until the end, it was cold every day. So there was no slush. The trail was firm. We did have one day of wind, but that was okay. One of the challenges with the Yukon River also is that it's 120 miles between villages. And so there's like nothing there except for the one checkpoint called Eagle Island. And so what Ian, my brother's friend, had told the videographer guy, what he had told me before is he said, Eagle Island, there's nothing there. Like the bathroom is a tarp. Like there's nothing. So our expectations were low, and, people like oftentimes have to bivvy out on the river and it's 30 below and really challenging. So when we got to Eagle Island, the last musher had just left. So it was the last night that volunteers for the checkpoint were going to be there. They were all flying out the next day. And they may have had leftover food. They made us spaghetti and meatballs and brought down this big pot down to our tent, and they put us up in a tent with a heater, and said, hey, we're going to leave the generator running and here's your power strip so you can charge all your stuff in the tent.
No
Oh, by
way.
the way, there's Starlink satellite internet. And
Oh, no way.
here's a little half a bottle of whiskey. And here's the and here's the bottled water. So you don't need to melt snow. You can just like take the bottled water and heat it up on the diesel powered heater in the stove to heat water in the morning. So we were just so lucky to be there at that time. Because if we'd been a day later, everyone would have flown out and there would have been nothing there. And in fact, when the people on foot came through a few days later, that's what they encountered. Like there was
nothing there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so they had a cold bivvy on the river. So we were
And
just
if you'd been there earlier, you would have encountered dog traffic and probably not been allowed, or you wouldn't have been treated so well because they needed that stuff for the mushers and the dogs. So
we're busy.
It's perfect timing.
Yeah, it was awesome. And that's kind of like, I would say the hallmark of the second half of the trip was just a combination of like luck and then taking advantage of good conditions and going, when we could. Like it was just awesome. And we were just appreciative that we had that.
Yeah.
And then we get up to Caltag and I'm in there and there's someone who looks like a family friend. Our grandmas were best friends in northern Minnesota, and
stop it.
My mom and his aunt were best friends in high school, and so I was like, "Wait, are you Alex Buto?" And he had run the Iditarod before with a dog team, so I knew, and his dad had too, so I knew he was kind of connected to the Iditarod. So it was fun to see him. Just
that's crazy.
Running into people in the gym at the Caltech school.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
You do literally never know. We were in Duluth for Arrowhead, and I think it was the place that makes everything out of leather.
Mm-hmm. Like Duluth Pack.
What's the other one?
Frost River.
Frost River. Yes, Thank you. We were in Frost River, and just conversation with some old guy behind the counter. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I used to run dogs up the Caltag Portage from Unicalede, and we used to stay in a cabin and go hunting. And yeah, I know all those trails so well." And it's just like so random, and you share this experience with somebody that you would have no idea you'd run into. That being said, I'm not from northern Minnesota, where you do have people who mush, and I mean it's a little more northern facing than Iowa, but that's just super cool to run into like familiarity,
right?
As you're on this 1,000-mile adventure.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yep.
So I sent the photo to my mom, and she couldn't believe it. And
I bet.
Yeah,
I bet she's like, seriously?
Yeah,
you seriously ran into somebody?
Yeah.
Let's jump ahead to the Bering Sea. Unicalede, you run down from Caltag over to the Caltag Portage, which is the trail down to the Bering Sea, and there you run into Unicalede.
So that's when we hit the ocean, and that was, to me, that felt like such a huge milestone. To go from the ocean at Kinnick all the way across the Alaska Range, through the interior, through these ghost towns, mining, like gold mining district, Yukon River, and then be back at the ocean. Like that just felt like, oh my God, we have come so far. This is incredible.
Do you remember when you first saw it?
Of course, yeah. We got to Unalakleet, and one of the nice things about being with race veterans is we'd get to the town and they'd be like, okay, we're going to take this street and this alley, and kind of get exactly where we needed to go. We went up over, the sun was setting. And so we kind of went up on the road that runs along the coast to take a picture and kind of experience the sun setting in Unalakleet.
It's incredible there, isn't it?
Yeah, it was wonderful. And so,
water or ice?
What's that?
Are you looking out over water or ice?
It was ice.
It was ice. Okay.
Yeah.
It was all water when I was there.
Really?
Oh yeah, It was all water. Yeah, I'll send you a picture at some point. But
okay. Wow.
Yeah.
It was all. And we were
gorgeous orange, deep sunsets. Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. And we were at Peace on Earth Pizza. And the owner, Brett, is great. And we had drop boxes there, and he, fed us pizza, and friends, my husband and friends had called ahead and paid for pizzas. And so we got there, and he said, everything is covered for all 5 of you for the night. Like, you're good. You don't need to give me any money. And so it was just such a fun, celebratory environment. We were just so happy that we had made it that far. And then in the morning, he came over in his bathrobe to make us breakfast and send us on his way. He's wonderful. Really
He is wonderful.
appreciate him being there.
For sure. For sure.
So
So
then
then you've got kind of circumnavigate Norton Bay, Norton Sound.
Yep, exactly. And that was interesting. I had known that it could be windy right around Shaktoolik. Ian had warned me about that, talking about a musher who had just kind of like at one point just sat down on the ice and he was just done because it was so windy.
Wow.
Here. So when we got there, it was windy, and then the Italians would say, "Oh yeah, last year when we were here, the wind speed was twice as high, so this isn't so bad. It could be worse." And that logic always resonates with me. Like, it could be worse. I should appreciate what I have, the conditions that we have. So we got through that. And then, headed across did the big crossing the next day. And that went fairly smoothly. The forecasted wind speeds were only 15 miles an hour. So, it's still definitely like a headwind in our face. I got a couple splotches of frostbite on my cheeks, but they were shallow and minor and in the scheme of things.
It could be worse.
Yeah, exactly. So then we got to Koyuk, and, I would say from that point on, it was just fun and beautiful, and we'd be along the sea ice sometimes and be along the hills sometimes, and the trail conditions were great. Everything was kind of it had like all firmed up, and just kind of riding through the hills. It was just pretty dreamy. And then we got to White Mountain and stayed at the home of Joanne Wasili and Jack, and that was nice to get the hospitality and hang out with their dogs and kids, take a hot shower, sleep in a bed. And then we left, and then that was our last night kind of on the trail. Got an early start the next morning. It was 20 below. We were pretty chilly, but stopped at the couple cabins for, lunch and coffee breaks. And then once we got close to Nome, a friend of a friend had ski joored out to greet us. So he came out with his two dogs and got to meet him. And then the last 5 miles were on an ice-covered road all the way into Nome. And I do a little bit of road biking. And so once I hit the road, I was just like so excited to like go fast. So Tiziano caught up to me and he said, no, we have to finish together. And I was like, yeah, of course. I know. I'm just going fast and having fun. He's like, okay, let's wait for the others. So I said, okay. And then once they caught up, I was like, okay, when do we start the sprint? Like we're going to have a sprint finish, right? And they said, no sprint. So, and I was like, I know, I'm just kidding. So we all finished side by side under the Burled Arch. Once I saw the arch, like I just started crying, like, because I've seen pictures of the Burled Arch in Nome and it's so iconic, and just to see it there was incredible.
What was it like to ride up that ramp to the arch, under the arch, and cross the arch?
Surreal. Yeah. To see it and be like, oh my God, we're here. We came here from like near Anchorage. We've been out here for 3 weeks and it was awesome. One of the things we did too is every day when we were done riding, we would give each other a hug and say, good job. And the Italians would tell me, brava. So of course we did the same thing when we got to Nome. We gave each other, hugs and then got our pictures taken, and it was awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And then that night, the people who met us at the finish said, oh yeah, we were just over at the Mushers Banquet. And it had kind of been a goal of mine to go to the Mushers Banquet. So the Mushers Banquet is on the Sunday night, 2 weeks after the start of the dog sled race. And I kind of wanted to go because it's like this big long thing where all the mushers give speeches. And so George and I went over there, and it was pretty sweet because it's like $60 to get in the door. But we got there an hour or two late, and so no one was at the door anymore collecting money. So we just walk in, and the buffet is still set up, and we have these appetites from being out on the trail. So we're filling up on that. And it was so cool to see the mushers who we had met on the trail and see them there, all clean and rested and getting their awards and just to kind of take it, like it was just the perfect like ending to this experience to see kind of that like the awards for the dog sled race and, just kind of feel a part of that event a little bit too.
That's a perfect kind of closure.
Yeah.
Because I actually went to the Mushers Banquet myself and know what a celebration it is for all of those guys. So I can only imagine how excited they were to see you guys roll into town. And it's like, oh, hey, let's bring it all together.
Yeah, like we made
That's
it.
pretty
We
cool.
saw you like 400 miles ago, but we made it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's super cool. So this big adventure, certainly not your biggest, but what do you take home with it? What do you bring back to northern Minnesota, to the lower 48 from Alaska, from Nome?
That's a good question. I mean, I think in addition, like, well, one thing is, this has been kind of a long time in the works. Like, I started with Arrowhead 135 and all that kind of stuff over 10 years ago. I think like 2010, maybe I was volunteering up there, maybe 2010, I think. So I've been kind of into this like winter race thing for a long time, and doing these like Arctic canoe trips. Like this is kind of like, it was really cool to be able to put together so many different pieces from my background, in terms of like the Arctic canoe trips, the winter camping, and then like the cycling and the winter bike races and all of that. So I think that was really cool, to be able to put all those pieces together and accomplish, finishing this. And then another really big thing is just reflecting on, they say it takes a village, and just reflecting on how many people have supported and encouraged me throughout the years, and especially how many people have been so close behind me and really helping, facilitate this whole thing. So, before I came up here, some friends put on a fundraiser for me, and they put in a ton of work for that, and got donations from local businesses and friends who, Jeremy Kershaw donated a race entry to Heck of the North, and a friend who makes jewelry donated jewelry, and a friend who makes spoons donated wooden spoons. Just so many people donated things, and then other friends just gave so generously. And, people have just been so positive and encouraging. And I feel like, I'm extremely appreciative of that, because, there was a point when I was in the fundraiser, I thought, if something goes bad and I have to quit, there's going to be a lot of people disappointed, that I have to quit. Like there's so many people rooting for me, and I'm so appreciative of all of that energy. And so, I thought, like, I have been thinking, ever since then, like, I owe a lot of people a lot of support and encouragement to help them pursue their dreams, because I have been the recipient of so much like positive energy and love and help. And I really need to like figure out how to help other people in this, do what they need. Because you can't do things like this just isolated and on your own. Like it does take a lot of people to help encourage and support in various ways. So that's one of the things I need to figure out, is how to be better at helping other people instead of just.
Well, I think just telling your story helps out. I have one kind of more question, and maybe it's the same thing and maybe not, but for those of us who, are down here and sleeping in our own beds at night, and doing a 100K gravel road race and thinking that's a big deal, and can't visualize actually being able to ride a bike across the Alaska Range, through Alaska to the Bering Sea and on to Nome. For someone who's done it, who quit their first Arrowhead and who only made their first Heck of the North because they got to the halfway point by accident, kind of. Mm-hmm. What do you say to all of us who feel like that's an impossible, like I can't even list that as a dream, because it's just plain impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is you can't give up on your dreams, because if you don't keep the faith, then it will become too late at a certain point. Like, this is something that I had wanted to do, and I said to my husband, like, this is something I want to do in my life, and why would I wait until I'm older? I'm like young, I have the fitness now. Like, why would I put this off? So I think the biggest thing is like not giving up on those dreams, but continuing to work towards them. And I think also surrounding yourself with people who are supportive and encouraging of those dreams. And like I said, I think the biggest thing is just not to give up hope.
Perfect. I love it. Well, listen, we've been chatting for a hot minute. It's kind of funny, when I came out with the film 1,000 Miles to Nome, somebody's like, it was kind of long. And I was like, dude, it's 1,000-mile race. Of course It was long. We went a little over an hour, but it's 1,000-mile race. Of course it took a while to tell the good stories from your trip. So I really, really appreciate your time and congratulate you on, all of your feats. And I feel like you're just kind of getting started, and doing this stuff is just a part of who you are. And that's pretty darn cool.
It is. Great. So, yeah, thank you. This has been a lot of fun to tell my stories, and it's a great trip.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode, and thanks to Leah for making time before she is trading snowdrifts for sandy beaches. Look for her on Instagram and Facebook. It doesn't sound like she is done with these great adventures, and you're going to want to follow her along. Later this week, I've got a bonus episode for you. Leah talked a lot about how great it feels to reach Unalakleet on the Bering Sea, and the pizza joint called Peace on Earth Pizza. When I was there in 2019, I talked with Peace on Earth owner Brett Hansen. It's pretty interesting how a little pizza joint in a small village on the Bering Sea can thrive serving all the villages in western Alaska. I hope you'll enjoy it and tune in later this week. Now, I'd like to thank Chain and Spoke Coffee and Bikes for supporting the show. You can order your favorite blend now at chainandspoke.com. Or you can just stop by their first retail location in Des Moines, Iowa. Great coffee, great bikes. Service, too, if you need your bike fixed. If you are headed across the country on either I-80 or I-35, stop on in. You'll be glad you did. And I'd like to thank you for listening to Bike Talk with Dave. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so by rating, reviewing, and sharing. If you'd like to support the show financially and help improve the show, you can go to buymeacoffee.com and throw some change my way. I promise I'll use it to make the podcast better. And I will send you a Bike Talk with Dave sticker. There's a link to Buy Me a Coffee in the show notes. We've got a busy month ahead. This week, the Trofeo Sabato Santos circuit race in Des Moines, where we'll be spinning skinny-tired bikes around pavement. And at the end of the month, we'll be back on gravel enjoying the beautiful hills of northeast Iowa in the Driftless 100. There's still time to join the fun at driftlessgravel.com. Hopefully, we'll see you there. And in mid-May, stage racing returns to the Midwest at the 3 Days of Des Moines, or Dryadogsy of Des Moines. I'm pretty sure I need to brush up on my Flemish, and I think I'll ask Chris Daggs how to say that. Anyway, the 3 Days of Des Moines, 3 days, 4 stages, all categories. It should be a great weekend of racing. You can find information at bikeiowa.com. Just click in May events, or you can look for a link in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you have a great week.